What's up, guys? Hi, and welcome to Uncle Scott's Kitchen. Today we've got 5 carbon steel facts, frequently asked questions. I get these a lot of times in the comment sections under my videos. People email me, ask me about carbon steel. If we do one thing around here at Uncle Scott's Kitchen, it is help people with their carbon steel pans and skillets, especially helping them get started correctly. So let's jump in and go through some of the frequently asked questions. First, is it okay to use metal utensils in carbon steel? Heck yeah, it is. You can use a metal turner or spatula. If you go crazy with a whisk, you might put about 10 zillion little scratches on your pan, but it's okay. As a matter of fact, if you get a few scratches in your pan, lots of people think that the next time you season your pan, those little scratches kind of give that seasoning something to grip to. So if you used a metal utensil like this in a non-stick skillet, you could ruin it just by making that one mistake one time. Carbon steel in most normal kitchen situations is borderline indestructible. It is a-okay to use metal utensils. How long does it take for a new pan to turn black? Now, as we all know, when carbon steel is new, it arrives like this, shiny and silvery. Then you get people on the internet like me showing these dark, black, shiny pans. Question is, how long does it take to go from shiny and silvery to dark black? The answer is kind of a multi-part answer. It depends on what you cook and the cooktop you have. For most normal cooking situations, if you're going to cook a couple of times a week, use your pan fairly regularly, you should expect, if you're just going to do this with normal cooking, several months, 3 months, 4 months, something like that. If you're new and that sounds like an eternity, don't worry, just keep cooking in your pan and that will go by before you know it. If you want to jumpstart the process, there are a couple of things you can do. The first, and the one I recommend the most, is cook some red meat. If you sear some red meat, like a steak, even a hamburger, at a high temperature, especially on a gas stove top, that will jumpstart the darkening process. You will see meaningful results the first time you do that. One of the manufacturers, I can't remember which one off the top of my head, in one of their instruction manuals one time said to cook meat in a pan, protein in a pan, 10 times to get a lot of darkening. Now, you're probably not going to cook 10 steaks in a row in one day. It's still going to take some time, but doing it that way will darken that pan in. It works really well on gas, not quite as well on a flat top stove, and that's because the heat of the flat top stove is only transferred where the pan contacts the cooktop, the cooking surface. On a gas stove, the heat kind of goes up and around the pan. So it takes a little bit longer on the flat tops, but you can do it pretty quickly on a gas stove. Now, if you want to, I don't recommend this, but if you want to take an afternoon and kind of get your pan dark, what you can do is just do kind of repeated stovetop seasonings. As a matter of fact, you can just put like 1 or 2 drops of oil in a pan, wipe it around until it looks dry, bring it up to heat on the stovetop and watch it. You gotta watch it carefully and move it around. Wait till that thing starts smoking, let it smoke a bit, and you will see that pan darken in. Now, you got to be careful when you do it, and then you got to let it cool down, and you can sit there and take 3 or 4 hours and just do that over and over and darken your pan in. But I really don't recommend doing that. I think it's much better to just spend your time cooking. If you season over and over and over, still don't know how to cook at the proper temperature, something's still going to stick. You're going to wonder what's wrong. You can still make a mistake with an acidic ingredient. Are you going to reseason your pan over and over and over? Probably not. I think your time is much better spent cooking. So in normal cooking situations, expect several months for a pan to darken in. You can jumpstart it with cooking red meat, or you can spend an afternoon messing with your pan on your stovetop if you really want to do it. After the initial seasoning, do you have to season your pan every time you use it? Absolutely not. Once you've gotten your pan initially seasoned, then you only need to do touch-up seasonings as necessary, only when the pan needs it. It's not going to need to be seasoned every time you cook. For an example, this debouillé 9.5-inch omelet pan. I use that exclusively for eggs. It rarely even gets washed. Normally I just wipe it out with a paper towel, and it practically never needs to be re-seasoned. Now a bigger pan like this that I might sear a steak in, that I might cook bacon in, something where there's going to be more cleanup, you might need to do a touch-up seasoning after that if something has pulled some seasoning off your pan, or if you've made a mistake, got something acidic in your pan and it pulls a little seasoning off. Only when your pan needs it do you need to re-season. You don't have to do it every time you cook. How do you fix a sticky pan? A sticky pan. Well, this depends on how sticky the pan actually is. If you've done your seasoning correctly and you take your pan out of the oven or let it cool down on the stovetop, run your fingers across the cooking surface of the pan. If it feels smooth and cold and like hard metal, you should be good to go. If it feels slightly tacky or sticky or plasticky, if the color looks uniform and you get a little bit of stickiness, then I think what you need to do here is just reheat the pan and let that oil harden in and polymerize. You probably either didn't have the oven hot enough or didn't leave it in there for long enough. Same thing on the stovetop, may not have heated it long enough for the oil to polymerize. All I would do there is heat the pan back up until it smokes a little bit, let that oil harden in, and you should be good to go. Depending on the amount of stickiness, you may have to do that a time or two. Now, if the pan is really sticky, if you look at it and run your fingers across it and it's bumpy, if there are dried, kind of sticky blobs of oil or drops of oil or big streaks and smears, you know you've probably used too much oil. You got to get that out. I would not try and harden that in. I would get that out of there and start over. Easy way to do that is just get some steel wool or a scrubby sponge and some dish soap, hot water. Hopefully some of that will come out. If not, you can kind of move up to steel wool, or you can use some acidic ingredients. Put some vinegar in there, that will eat through. Or what you can do is take a can of tomatoes, something acidic like that, and simmer those for 15 minutes. That should eat that gunk out of there. In another video I showed on how to nuke carbon steel pans and skillets, I said that you can run the pan through the cleaning cycle on your oven. You can do that, but I do not recommend that. That should only be done as a last ditch effort right before you're going to throw a pan away. If it's gotten to that point, in most normal circumstances, that should never need to be used or be used. So if it's a little sticky, heat it back up, let that oil polymerize and harden in. If it's really sticky, if you've really messed up, get that gunk out of there and re-season correctly the next time. And for the final frequently asked question, and get this all the time, going to be a two-parter here. Do you need to season the handles of the pans? And do you need to season the bottoms of the pans? And here it kind of depends. And the first thing I want to say here is I focus most of my efforts, almost all of my efforts, on the cooking surface. That's the most important part. That's where your food is going to be cooked. The handle and the bottom of the pan is kind of secondary. I use the pans on gas cooktops, and there's metal grates that get scratched up, and the bottoms are kind of ratty to begin with. So I don't do too much maintenance on the bottoms of the pans. That being said though, if I were going to season a pan in the oven, and it was a pan like this Matfer with an uncoated strip steel handle, when I wipe the oil all over that pan, I would wipe it all around on the bottom and the handle as well. After all, why not? It gets seasoned in the oven, and I think it does help to protect the handle there. Now, when I season a pan on the stovetop, I typically do not worry too much about the handle or the bottom of the pans, and here is why. Usually there's enough of that protective oil. You know, when we wash a pan, we dry it, we put a couple of drops of protective oil on a pan. I typically wipe that all over the entire pan, including the bottom, and if it's an uncoated handle, on the handle. That tends to kind of build up over time, and if you use your pan regularly, there's enough of that protective oil left on there so that when the pan heats up, you get a little protection that way. Also, if you're using a flat top stove, you don't want to get too much oil on the bottom of that pan, because when you put it on that burner, you don't want any of that oil to kind of transfer and fuse to your nice flat cooktop. You'll end up having to scrape that off with a razor blade. Okay, look somewhere on this screen for links to other carbon steel videos you might find helpful and enjoyable. If you have more carbon steel facts, make sure you post those in the comment section below. If I notice some big themes of developing there, I will try and do another video with more carbon steel facts down the road. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time on Uncle Scott's Kitchen.